Okay, the first thing that we need to learn in any 3D program that we're using is how to navigate around in the world. So inside of Blender, the default settings for this is if you just middle mouse, that will rotate around your object like this. If you hold down Shift and middle mouse, you can see you're going to pan around. And if you hold down Control and middle mouse and drag up and down, that's going to be zoom like this. Now if you get off side of the screen anywhere, you can actually tap the period key on the numlock area and that will do a focus for you. You can middle mouse scroll the wheel and that will zoom in and out. One thing that helped me that I was used to inside of ZBrush was being able to pan, rotate, and everything, actually rotate about the center of the object. And so if you go under Edit, Preferences, and let's drag this down here, go to Navigation, you can do this orbit around selection, and this gave me the results that I was used to whenever I rotate around the object. What if you're used to using a program like Maya and you want to use those same type of controls inside of Blender? It is a possibility for you to do that. So let's take a look at that real quick. We can go to Edit and we can go to Preferences, and if you go to the key mapping area right here, instead of Blender, we can change that to industry compatible like that. And I believe we can save the preferences and just close out of that like this. And then now you can do Alt left mouse, and you can do Alt middle mouse to pan. Alt left mouse is our rotate. Alt middle is going to be pan. And then Alt right click and move up and down is going to zoom. We still have the scroll wheel and that works for zooming in and out. Now if we want to frame our object, we can just tap F, but if we have it selected, then it's going to frame in it on this way like this. Now one thing I do want you to note before we get started is that when we change those settings, it's going to change a whole lot of the default hotkeys that exist inside of Blender to a new set of hotkeys. So I'm going to try to do my best to see about what those hotkeys might be if we switch those different controls. But either method should work for you, but if you switch to this industry compatible method, some of the tutorials and things like that that I'm seeing out there, you're going to have to pay attention to that and maybe do a little bit of digging to find what the new hotkey equivalents for things are. So I just wanted to point out that even if we're using the industry compatible settings for moving and rotating and zooming in and out on things, we're going to go to Edit, Preferences, and make sure that we have on Navigation, we're still going to be using this option for Orbit Around Selection. Let's take a look at translation, rotation, and scale of our objects, and we're going to be using the key mapping of Blender for this. So if you want, you can actually click on these icons for translation, rotation, and scale, and you're going to get the gizmo for this, and that's going to be pretty straightforward, being able to move on any of these or using these planes to move in two different axes like this. Same thing for rotation. If you do this rotation out there, it's going to do camera-based rotation. Then you can do specific axes for rotation here on this. If we grab the scale, if you want to do a uniform scale, you can grab that outer circle like this. If you want to scale two axes at a time, you can use the plane like what you see there. So something else that Blender has that's pretty interesting, if you use the hotkeys for things, and we'll do translate first, which is the hotkey G. So you tap G and it puts you in this moving mode, which lets you freely move about. But if you tap X, it's going to constrain the movement to the X axis. If you do tap Z while you're in this mode, it'll move it up and down like this. And if you tap Y, it's going to move it back and forth like this. And whenever you're done, you can just left click and it's put it into this new position. So go ahead and hit undo for that. And if we want to do rotate, we can tap the R key, and this is going to be this free rotate. But again, if we tap X, we can rotate in X, Z, or Y. So depending on how you want to move this object, you just rotate it and then left click to accept it. I'm going to undo for that. And then the last one is scale. So you tap S for this and it'll put you in this uniform scale mode. And again, if you want to do scale in Z, you can do this, X or Y. And then to commit, you just left click and you've got your scale set for that. So that's this additional thing that I just showed you on there is a little bit different than the industry compatible mode, and so it took me a little bit of getting used to that, but it seems like it could be a kind of powerful way of being able to quickly move, scale, and rotate on a specific axis. So one last thing that I wanted to note is whenever you're in the Blender key mapping, if you have it on the translation, rotation, or scale gizmo, or this universal gizmo tool that you have here, if you want to go to the pick tool, the hotkey for that is if you tap W, and it'll go to the pick tool. Now if you tap W multiple times, it's going to cycle through different types of pick modes, and you can explore that, but the only thing that I'm really kind of concerned about is just this selection type that you see here for selection of a box. So if you'd like to use industry compatible settings, let's take a look at how we can translate and rotate scale and use the transform tool. So if we just tap the hotkey W for this, that's going to give us our translation that we can do here, and we can do the different axes, and we can use these planes to move in two different axes just like that. And if we tap E, that'll give us our rotate, and we got this free rotate and the different axes that we've got. So I'm going to hit undo for that, and then the last is R, and then we can do a uniform scale, and we can do individual scaling like this, and we can do scaling on two different axes like that as well. And if you tap T, that will put you in this gizmo tool that's got translation, rotation, and scale all put together. And I'll let you explore with that. And if you want to tap out and you just want to use just the selection tool, you can tap Q for that. Okay, now that we know about navigation and how we can translate, rotate, and scale, let's talk about the next part here, and that will be moving from object mode. And you can see we've got the object selected. So if you treated this cube, and if you think about real world, it's a vase or something like that, a pencil, anything, that's an object. We're working at that level of scaling, rotation, and translation of that entire object. Now if we want to go into the component mode of those would be vertices, edges, and faces. We need to go out of this object mode, and we're in the Blender key mapping right now to take a look at this. Let's go out of object mode and then go into edit mode like this. And once we go into edit mode, you can see up here, these are the vertices, these are the edges, and then these are the faces. And if you hold down Shift, you can actually select all of these and turn them all on at the same time. But you might find that you might want to just work with just these at any given time. Just a quick note about the default Blender key mapping. Whenever in object mode, if you want to go between object mode and component mode and you want to do a hotkey for that, instead of going up here, you can just hit tab and it'll go back and forth between that. And again, 1, 2, and 3 for verts, edges, and then faces, and then again tab to go back into object mode. So if you got it on verts, you can select a vert. If you hold down Shift, you can select more than one vert. We can go back to the translation, rotation, and scale tool for this. And so if you're used to 3D programs, this is all going to be very familiar to you. We can translate these two verts like this. We can move these things around on the axis like this, and then go ahead and scale too. So if you remember all the hotkeys that we talked about for the Blender setup, those are all going to be valid for you. So if you tap G, that's going to move, and again we can move this on Y, we can do Z, we can do X, and if you're happy with the setting on that, you can just click and you're good to go for that. So that's going to give you these different settings for that. So again, whenever you're in the Blender key mapping, if any of these manipulators get in the way of you selecting, you can actually tap W to go to the pick tool. And so then I can just continue to manipulate these and then grab these like this, and then I can put it on the gizmo tool to start moving these things around like that. The other thing that we can do is use hotkeys to select between verts. So if you tap 1, you're in verts. If you tap 2, you are in edge mode. And if you tap 3, you're in face mode like this. Okay, so the other thing, I'm going to tap 2 to go into edge mode. And if you want to turn on symmetry, you can go up here and you can see we've got an X symmetry like that we can work on for that. So you might find that useful. I do think that would be very useful for you modeling. You'd be able to just grab one side of the model and be able to work with that and tweak the shape of this. Okay, so that's a little bit about how we can get going back and forth between the edit mode and then hopping back over to object mode, so we can go back and forth between these two different modes. So for in industry compatible mode for the key mapping, it's super easy to go in and out of object mode and go into the edit mode. So we can go from here, we just tap 1 and we got verts. If you tap 2, you got edges. You tap 3, you got faces. And if you tap 4, you're back in object mode. So again, super simple to be able to hop back and forth between those modes. I'm going to select 2 and then select an edge here, and you can see in the industry compatible mode it's going to be real easy for us to use what we looked at. If we're going to do the pick tool, we can tap Q, so if the manipulators get in our way, we can do that, and we can just select multiple things like this and then tap W for move. And so maybe I move these faces down and maybe I want to move them back at an angle like this. So you can see that, and I'll just push this back a little bit further. We can do R for scale, so we can scale this in, and if we tap E, we can do a little bit of rotation. So maybe we rotate the shape this way, or I'm not going to go. I'm going to go like this here with it. And again, no matter which mode we're on, if we want to turn on symmetry, we can turn on X right here for the symmetry, and then I can just select this edge here, and you can see that we're working in a symmetrical mode. And so that should make it very easy for you to be in this industry compatible mode, to be able to go tap 1, 2, 3, 4 to go to the different modes, and then Q, W, E, R, and then T to get the different manipulators that you see here. Okay, I want to introduce you to something called quick favorites, and I think this could be a way that whenever you're first starting to use Blender, could probably just speed up things for you quite a bit. And once you find things in the menus, you can add them to things like this. So the other interesting thing is it's got a quick menu. So like in the key mapping, the Blender mode, let's just take a look at that real quick. You can tap Q for that, and then it'll bring up this menu. I don't have anything stored for it yet because I want to show this to you. And if we are in the industry compatible mode, then if you do Shift Tab, sorry, my cursor is over here on this thing. I'll just escape out of that. You can do Shift Tab, and that will bring up the quick favorites. So that's the hotkey for bringing this thing up. And let's start looking at how we can add some things to that. So I'm going to put this on the Blender mode, like this. Just leave this here. And what I want to do is go from object mode, and I want to go into edit mode, like this. So I'm going to right click in here and say add to quick favorites. Okay. So now I can just, because I'm in the Blender mode, I'm going to tap Q, and I can go into edit mode, like this. Now if I tap Q again, you can see I do have a quick favorites for going into object mode. If you want to get rid of things, you can remove it from the quick favorites. I'll do that, and then I'll tap Q, nothing's in there. So now if I want to go into object mode from there, I can go click on here, right click, and say add to quick favorites, like this. And so I'm in this mode. I can tap Q now and then go into object mode, tap Q, and then go into edit mode. So that's a way that I can go back and forth between these two different things inside of here. Okay, so in the Blender thing, what I was showing you is that if you do the hotkeys for G for grab, and if you do S for scale, and if you do R for rotate, it puts you in that mode. I'm not the biggest fan of that. I would rather be using these tools over here. So what you can do is add these to the quick favorites as well. So if I right click on there and say add to quick favorites, add to quick favorites, add to quick favorites, now I can tap Q, and you can see I can go into edit mode, I can go back and forth, I can tap Q, and now I can go move, rotate, scale. And so it's pretty simple for me to go back and forth in between here. So if I went to the edit mode, same thing. If you didn't want to use the hotkeys for this, if you wanted to do verts, you could right click on here, add to quick favorites, add to quick favorites, add to quick favorites. And then now when I tap Q, I could be in object mode, and I could do, let's see, edit mode. I can go here to select mode 1, 2, 3. So that's going to give you your verts, your edges, and your faces. So anything that you see in here, it'll give you that option to add that as well. So let's take a look in the object mode to be able to add the quick favorites on here for turning on symmetry. So tap Q, and now I could turn on symmetry. And if I tap Q again, if I go to select mode 1 like this and put it on, let's see, if I tap Q, I don't have these added to it, so I can add quick favorites like this, and then now I could tap Q and I could go to move, and I've got symmetry turned on. So again, it could be a mode for you. I know this listed after you get some things in there, it's probably going to get it a little bit longer, but it could help you set up, like, these are the key things that I am looking for and I want to be able to use those. And depending on which mode that you're in, and maybe what tool that you're using, these quick favorites react to that. So I do think that I'm going to utilize that throughout the rest of this, and maybe that'll make it a little bit more universal for just going to the quick menu on here and then go to the quick favorites and then selecting something. So depending on which setting that you want to go with, that might make it just a little bit more universal for here on out to be able to understand what is going on for the different operations that we're doing. So one thing I want to show you that is pretty useful whenever you're modeling is to be able to turn on and off wireframe on shaded mode. That's what they call it inside of Maya, so I was looking for that inside of Blender, and I actually set up a hotkey for that. So what you can do for this is actually come up to this menu, and you can see that you are toggling the wireframe on and off like this. And if you want to set up a hotkey, you can right click on here, and I've already made my hotkey set to Control-Shift-W. You can add whatever you want for that. So you can remove the shortcut. The other thing is we could add it to the quick favorites like we were doing before. So if I tap Q, you can see now I can turn on the wireframe like this. And if I go into edit mode, let's see if that still works on here. I might have to do it just for edit mode. Like I was saying, quick favorites work with the different modes that you're in. So let's go ahead and click here, and then you can see it looks a bit different at that point for this. I'm going to right click and say add to quick favorites, and then now I've got the ability to turn on or off wireframe. Well, actually it's not going to turn that off in this mode because it's going to let you see the verts, the edges, and everything. So if I go back to object mode and then just turn the wireframe off, I can do that. But again, I found that having a hotkey for that, Control-Shift-W, for me, works pretty good. So I did want to show you that just in case you see me turning that on or off to be able to see the wireframe. Now, when we start working with really dense topology, you'll definitely probably want to turn that off, and you don't want to see it, but you might want to actually see the wireframes whenever you do some remeshing and things like that. So I definitely think it's very useful at the very beginning stages whenever you're doing some very simple modeling of different shapes that you're working on. Okay, now that we know how to manipulate our objects and we've got a little bit of hotkeys going on, quick selection sets, things like that, let's now take a look at how we can add different objects. So if we select this and just hit delete, if we are in the Blender key mapping, if we hit Shift A, that'll bring up an add menu. So there's a lot that you can get to and through here. So let's go to mesh, and then if we put the cube back in, anything that you add, you're going to get this this little thing down here at the bottom where you can open this up, this menu, and then we can manipulate some of the settings on there. So if you want some exact increments on there, things like that. So you can go to 4 meters, you can go to 1 meter, stuff like that. You could do specific rotations on things. So if we are rotating about Z, and if you wanted that to be like 45 degrees, if you wanted to get some exact measurements or things like that for that, you could go ahead and do that at that point. The other thing is if we select this and if we tap N in the Blender mode, we can get this menu over here off to the side. That's going to give us some information about transform. We got the tool. So there's some different things that you're going to be able to find from here. But if you're used to Maya and you're used to the channel box, this is about the equivalent of that. So that's going to let us go in here and add things. And you can see right now we're in this menu up here for layout. And if you go to modeling, things change quite a bit. And if you go to add, this is where you could add a lot of the different things that you see in through here. So if we went to add, and if you knew that you're going to use this quite a bit, let's see if we can go to add to quick favorites for add on here. So now if I tap Q and we go to the add, we can go to the add menu just like we've got going on through there. So what I wanted to check out and see if this would work is if we go to key mapping and go to Blender and change this to industry compatible, because we've grabbed that as a quick selection thing, we can tap Shift Tab in here, and I'm not sure why that's popping up over there. I'll do Shift Tab over here, and we've got add, and we can do it that way. So that's a way that we could potentially capture some of that menu and get to it. But no matter what, you could go up here and go to modeling, go to add, and you could do the same thing no matter if we're in industry compatible or Blender like that. So I am going to hit Shift Tab on here, add, and then do a mesh. And then they've got a bunch of different primitives that you can choose from. Let's just put it on the cube again, and then I'm going to frame in on here. So again, on this mode, it's going to be F, and if we're in the Blender mode, we can tap the period key like this. That's got to be sorry, it's got to be on the numpad for that. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how we can start adding multi-resolution subdivision levels to this so we can start sculpting on it. So let's go ahead and take a look at adding subdivision levels to our model. And what I'm going to do is go over here to this little wrench icon, and then this is where you can add modifiers. And within there, they do have a modifier for doing a subdivision surface. But what I'm going to use is this multi-resolution surface, so then that way we can go up and down in the subdivision levels that we have. So you go here, you can just click subdivide, and I'm going to divide it up to about 6 times, and that gets rid of any of the polygons that you're seeing in here. Now you can have this drop back down in through here with the slider, and so you can see what that looks like, and that could be different whenever you're sculpting. The level could be different than maybe what's going on in the level viewport, and also what's going on whenever you're rendering this thing. Now, one thing that did trip me up whenever I first started using this is whenever I was rotating around the canvas, it was dropping down to a lower resolution, but that's whenever we're in the sculpting mode. So let's look at how we can go from object mode and we can go into sculpting mode. And again, I can always right click and say add to quick favorites, and then instead of using this menu, depending on which mode that I'm in, I can go to my quick favorites and then go into the sculpting mode. And then now while we're in the sculpting mode, you see how this drops down to this lower resolution, and I was like, what is going on with that? And I had to do a little bit of digging, and I was able to find in this options menu right here, under display, there's fast navigate. So if you want to turn that off and you don't want to have that going on, I do obviously believe that this is for purposes where you've got a lot of dense meshes and it's slowing your machine down. You can turn that on, so while you're rotating it drops it down to a lower resolution. So if you're just working with one object like what we've got at this time, this is probably just fine for you to be able to turn this off. But then you might find that if you ever need to turn that back on, if you're getting a lot of extreme lag after you've got a lot of different pieces on there, you could potentially turn that on and then be able to work with a lot more meshes that are at a high density level. Okay, so it looks like we're actually ready to start sculpting on here. So one thing about the interface that might help is looking at these icons might be a little bit difficult to understand exactly what those mean. If you click and drag the interface out like this, and I might have to do, there we go. If you drag it out like this, you can put the icons next to each other like this. If you drag it out even further, then you can get a list of this, and I definitely think this is helpful. It's been helpful for me just starting off trying to learn what we've got. So if you're used to ZBrush, just the standard brush is like this draw brush that you see here, and you can click and drag on the mesh and we can start to sculpt, and we can add to this surface, and then we can hold down Control and we can dig in, and if you hold down Shift, you're going to be able to smooth. So very, very similar to anything that I've used inside of ZBrush. I'm going to hit undo, multiple times. The other thing is if we want to sculpt with symmetry, we can turn symmetry on like this. And again, because we're in a sculpting mode, we're in a different mode, and we don't have access to, if we do our quick favorites, we don't have access to this anymore. So if we want to set that, let's just right click and say add to quick favorites, and now I can tap Q and I can turn on and off symmetry just by tapping Q right under my cursor like this. And if we want to change the brush size, just tap F and you can drag left or you can drag right. Okay, and then that's going to control the size of this. Okay, so you can see that even the density that we're working at is, we can see the polygons. I would suggest at the very beginning, when you're just getting started with things, that you shouldn't have too much geometry. Now, anytime we're sculpting, we can subdivide this and go even further, and we might have to go to this. You saw that when we're sculpting, the levels here were different than the level viewport, so I just added it and made it exactly the same. So again, we're going to hold down Control on here while we're sculpting, and that will dig in, and then we can just sculpt on here, and that'll raise the surface, and we hold down Shift and we can smooth. So this is the pretty standard tools for any of the digital sculpting programs. You're going to either add to the surface, subtract from it, or smooth from it. The other thing we can do, again, we've looked at this a little bit earlier. If you tap N, this will bring up this menu that you see over here, and if we go to Tools, we can see all the different settings that you would have for the brush. And it's basically the equivalent of having this open here. So if you went up to this Activate tool and work settings, it's a way to be able to see all this, but then you could still have the modifier thing open at the same time. Let's continue to take a look at some of the other brushes that we have inside of here. So if we do the Draw Sharp, and we just click and drag out on this, you can see that it's going to, if we look off to the side here, it kind of does a shape like this, what it's carving out of this thing. And it gives a really nice kind of detailed look. I think this is a very similar brush to what ZBrush has as far as the Damien standard brush. So the default is that it digs in. If you hold down Control, you can get another opposite thing to where it's going to raise the surface up. So I think it produces a really nice look, and you can start to do things that feel like maybe hard surface kind of shapes inside of there. So yeah, so that's an interesting one. I'm going to divide this sphere up one more time. Go up with that just to make it a little bit more crisp. And I'm definitely getting a little bit more slow down with this amount of geo that's on here. Okay, I'm just going to do this stroke again like this. Yeah, so let's see this. I'm going to pull this down to 8 like that. It's not the best resolution. So one thing I did notice about this is that we could do this. I could pull this down to let's do 2 divisions, and then maybe two divisions here for this. Maybe go 4. And actually, I'm gonna hit undo to get back to where I didn't have any sculpting on here. So what I'm going to do is actually apply this. So I'm going to take this modifier and I'm going to actually apply it, but we have to be in object mode to do that. So if I do this, I can hit apply, and that basically flattens that multi-resolution subdivision. And so now we can add another one to it. And now if we subdivide, maybe we got 3 division levels on there, and then I will go back into the sculpting mode like this, and I'll turn on symmetry as well, and I've got that on there for the quick thing, and still not quite enough. Let's pull this up, see where we're at resolution wise. I think I want one more, and let's see what that looks like. Okay, yeah, I think that's looking better. Okay, so I'll do that. We got these lines. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to show you is we tapped N to open up this menu that you see here. And if we go and open up the stroke area, we can do the spacing. So I think the default is 5%. And that's going to feel a little bit like, you can see like dot, 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 dot. And then the closer those dots are together, that's that spacing. It produces more of a continuous line. So if you ever see it kind of doing that dotted look, you can pull this down, but I know just like ZBrush, it's going to double up how many brush strokes there are, so it maybe slows it down or actually makes the intensity a little bit heavier. So there's something there. They also have this stabilized stroke, which is like the lazy mouse inside of ZBrush. So you can turn this on, and you've got a radius, and you got a factor. So I think the only thing that I was really worrying about is like how far out the radius is for this. So that definitely works pretty much to like exactly what I was used to inside of ZBrush for the lazy mouse, and then being able to do stuff like that. We can get really nice crisp lines for that. So let's take a real quick pause from taking a look at some extra brushes, and I wanted to show you how you could change the look of what we're seeing as far as the shader on here, and choose something that maybe you like the visual quality of this for sculpting a little bit better. So if we come up to this area, this is actually going to be this X-ray kind of mode. We are on this mode here, and if we go to this arrow, we can actually take it off of maybe what was on there for studio, and then we can let me take it off the X-ray. So it's on studio, we put on this Matcap. And if you go to the very first Matcap, that's what I have on here. It's got a better specular component to it. This, if anybody's ever used Mudbox, that kind of looks like the material from Mudbox. I'm kind of a fan of this one lately. It just has a nice specular component to it. It's got some different contrast that's going on with that one. And you can cycle through these and check them out and see what you might potentially like to use. I do like this. This feels pretty much like the red wax material that they have inside of ZBrush. And then also if you come here, you might be able to turn on cavity and turn that on, and you can see kind of the visual difference between that. And if you want to have this outline, it does a slight outline around the rest of your object. So depending on what visual look you're going for, and what kind of helps you identify the strokes that you're making on there, you might want to try some of those out and see about those options. Okay, let's take a look at clay and clay strips. So if we just put it on a clay, this brush is pretty simple. It just builds up. And again, if we tap F, we can make this brush size larger. Just build this up. Just hold down Shift to smooth out the results of this. Okay, and that feels like a single stroke here like that. And then if we go to clay strips, this one has more of a feeling like this. So I like to use this for like muscle striations. I think this clay strips kind of feels like a clay, I think maybe clay tubes. I use that in ZBrush, and then maybe clay is just like the clay buildup brush, like that. And again, if you hold down Control, obviously it's going to dig into the model. If you hold down Shift, we can smooth out the results. So we're going to look at how to add a custom shape or alpha to our brush. For this one, I'm going to use the clay strips brush that we were looking at before. And then what I'm going to do is just open up this texture area. Remember, we tapped N to open and close this, and we're set to tool on here. And so we can just go to this area, go to texture, and then I'm just going to show you what you have. So if you click the plus here, I'll call this just add alpha, like that. Hit enter for that, and you should see we have this over here. If we go from the modifier to the texture area, you should see this show up. You might have a list if you've made multiple ones. So I'm going to click on this add alpha, and then I'm going to go to open, and I'm going to navigate to where some images are. Okay, I found where an image is sitting that I'd like to load up, so I'm going to go ahead and load that. And you should see it pop over here, and then once you see it pop here in this area, you should have access to it to start using and sculpting. So you can see it definitely changes the shape of the brush. Now something else that we can do, this stroke type down here will start to matter to you. So I believe that was set to dots. And if we do drag dot, you can see we can kind of push and move this thing around like that. If we do space, you get something like this. And if we do anchored, we've got this where we can click and we can drag out for this thing, and you can rotate it around like that. So depending on what you're looking to do with this, I can choose a different image. Again, I'll sit here and I'll kind of wait for that to pop up like that. And again, you can do the plus, and if you hold down Alt, you can click and you can drag in there, and you can do a minus on there. Okay. And I wonder if we do a constant for our fall off, if we get something that's going to feel a bit more like that instead of maybe fading at the ends of that. So I think this was set to smooth before, so we get something like that. Okay, so that's a way that you could add an alpha to your image and change the shape of it, and then be able to do basically the equivalent of what ZBrush has for drag rectangle. Okay, I feel like we're getting the hang of using some of these different brushes now, so let's go through a few of them pretty quickly. So if we put it on the layer brush, that is going to raise up to a certain height based off of what your intensity is going to be. Now you can right click on this and you could control your strength, so let's pull the strength down like this, and then we could move up to a certain height on this for that. So that's layer brush. Let's take a look at Inflate. This one will make surfaces run into each other like this, so it kind of blows it up like a balloon, maybe like that. Okay, so just going to push this over like this, right through there. So that's what the Inflate is going to do. And if you do a Crease brush, that should pull things together like this. Okay, so what you could do with this is, if we took the draw sharp, tap F, make the brush size smaller, and you had some cracks running through here like this. If we use the crease brush, if we creased at the ends of this, we could get this to be like really tight at the end of it, or we can come through certain spots like this and kind of crease that up like that. And again, if we switch back to the Inflate, you could do this type of look, so you can see what the difference of that is. And if you hold down Shift, obviously we can smooth out some of the results that we've got going on for that and through there. Okay, so smooth, we've been doing that. So if you hold down Shift, you can turn any brush into smooth, but you could actually put it on the smooth brush if you want. So I'm going to put it on this Flatten, and with Flatten we can just go ahead and sculpt and then push down a specific area. If you want to use this fill, you can click and drag and paint in or sculpt in, and it's going to basically like fill in these kind of crevice or these cracks like you see here, like that. Okay, so the other thing is pinch. So pinch will do this. If we pull this, tap F, make the brush size a bit larger, pinch should pull these this side and this side closer together, kind of like what's going on with the crease. Let's see the crease. If we hold on Control Shift W, turn on our wireframe to see this. So you can kind of see how Crease is moving the geo like that. It's not really moving it as much as, let's try pinch. And you can see how that starts to come in together a bit more for some of that. Okay, I'm going to hit Control Shift W for me. That was just the hotkey that I set for wireframe. You might have put that on your quick favorites on there, and you can turn that on or off like that. And then the last thing that I wanted to show is the grab brush. So for this one, this is for large form changes. So if we move to the side here, and in the Blender mode, if I hold down Alt, I can snap to a side view like this. And so I might grab something like this, and maybe I'm going to turn this into the shape of a head or something. So I can grab this like this and through here. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and then I'm going to go to our sculpt levels and drop that down, and then I'm going to hold down Shift and then smooth this stuff out. And so with the different resolutions that we've got for sculpting, you can see we could affect the lower levels like that and then smooth out a whole lot of the details. So I'll push this all the way back up to the higher levels, and you can see what we've got going on here now. Okay, all right, so this is going to give me the beginning shapes of something that maybe is going to resemble the shape of a head. And if I come to the front, I'll do grab and I'll pull this in. We do have X symmetry turned on like this. Some more of this shape, and then I'll pull this down and through here like this to get a jaw. And then just smooth this out just a little bit like that. Okay. So I'm going to intentionally cause a problem here and show you what we can do with this if we don't have symmetry turned on and we wanted to get symmetry back onto the model. I'm going to start to show how we are going to start working with multi-resolution. It's kind of like their version of Dynamesh that they've got with their remeshing workflow. So let's say I've sculpted on one side of the model here like this, and we don't have this on the other side of the model. And I'm just trying to get something laid in here. So obviously we've got a difference on one side versus the other. Okay. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take one of the modifiers that they've got, and we've got it on the multi-res. But what I'm going to do is go to the add modifier and use the mirror modifier. Now we have to potentially go out of sculpt, go into object mode for this. And you can see that we're going to, we can mirror it on the x-axis like this, and that'll mirror it across. If you do bisect, it'll basically chop this off and then merge it together. So we could do that like this, and it's going to actually merge in the center of that. I didn't have to do anything for this mirror object, but if you have any problems with that, if you've got something else in the scene, you could potentially select it here. So let's say we go and add a cube to this, and let's do 0.1 for that. So it's just sitting inside there. And then we'll go back and select the head on here. We'll go to this mirror object, and you can see that we could use the cube as the center object for moving this thing across. But it looked like everything was fine with it being able to do that. Now, if things are not working correctly for you, you might have to flip on X, and you can see it's mirrored the other direction going across for us. So depending on what side you've got the sculpt detail on, you might have to flip this on here. And you could do the clipping thing, and you can tell it to merge with a really low threshold for that. And if we want to apply this, I'm going to go ahead and apply this and show you that. So we can go here and click apply. But there's a problem. So the reason that just happened, let me hit undo, is because we have these modifiers in a specific order. So we got the multi-res thing here, and then we got the mirror down here below. So you could reorder those, but we have the sculpt information on the multi-res. So what we want to do is, again, we're in object mode. You come up here and you can apply that modifier to it. So that kind of flattens it. So like if you're used to Maya, then you're deleting history on it, let's say, right? So after that's done, now we should be able to apply the mirror, and then we have that back, okay? We could go back into the sculpt mode, and we could turn on symmetry at that point. And if we hold down shift and then smooth out, we could smooth some of this out, but I don't think it's going to give us the results that we're hoping for. So what we could do is, I'll show you in the next part here, how we can start to do some remeshing. So that process that we just did was a destructive process. We killed all the subdivision levels that we really have on our model. And if we look at our wireframe on this, you can see we've got a pretty good density still on the mesh for things, but we don't have any way to go up and down in subdivision levels anymore. So now let's go ahead and start taking a look at remeshing in here, and that is basically the equivalent of what ZBrush has as far as Dynamesh. So we can go to, instead of object mode, we can go to sculpt mode, put that in there, and then you can see they do have dynamic topology, and then they've got this remesh. And if we go ahead and click remesh, before I do that, I'm going to turn on my wireframe. So again, you might have put that on a quick favorite to toggle that on and off. So we can see the density that we have going on here, and I'm just going to click remesh in here, and I'm actually going to right click and say add to favorites, but it looks like I've already got there, so that's why it's telling me to remove it. So if I ever want to get to that, I can just tell it to remesh, and it's going to take a second. And this is the resolution that we've got going on with this remesh right here, like that. So let's hit undo, and then we'll go back to remesh, and I'm going to make this a much smaller number. I'm going to go from 0.1 to 0.01, and then click remesh, check that out, see what the difference is here. So still not enough, so we need to drop down quite a bit more. So then I'm going to go to the next level. I'm going to go 0.001 and try that, and then click remesh and see where we're at with that. And hopefully I haven't dropped it too low. We'll see what happens here. I'm going to let it finish. Okay, so that took just a little bit. So if we zoom in on this mesh, let's take a look at what we've got, and I'll turn off the wireframe for it. So it's pretty dense. If I start to smooth this thing out, let's turn on the symmetry for this again and just smooth out the results and see. Now we can smooth across this thing pretty good. Okay, and so yeah, I'll keep it at that resolution as I'm working. But if you're using this topology at the very beginning, I wouldn't suggest having very much density to this. I do have quite a bit, but I was trying to preserve maybe some details that I've already sculpted. Let's take a look if we put this on the draw sharp, and if I were to put a mouth shape on here, I'm gonna go ahead and turn off this stabilized stroke just so I can freely sculpt a shape like this. And I'm gonna raise the surface up. I'll do this for some lips, just like that. I'll dig in here for a nostril, just like that. Maybe pull up and through here. Do this and through here, like that. And start to smooth some of this. Let's do a shape like this. Maybe come in through here. And this is what I'm talking about. Like this feels pretty heavy for me and pretty dense for how much resolution is on here, so I am going to raise this up to here. I'll click remesh, just because if I'm trying to move around and sculpt larger forms at this earlier stage, this does feel like probably just too much geometry. And I can even see the geometry here in the sculpt, but it's just not as responsive as I would like. So just with this, I'm just either going to push the surface in, or I'm going to pull it out. Just like that. Then smooth this stuff back. I'm getting a, I don't know, somewhat fun shape on here. So I'll zoom out a little bit, and I'll pull this not too far there. Let's pull this out a little bit. Go like this. Again, I can do the quick favorites and then just click remesh every so often, and that's going to obviously rebuild the topology for us. A little bit too low, so I don't know. It's making me think that maybe the quick favorites for this for remesh might have something to do with the resolution that's set. So I'm gonna try this up here. Click remesh. And if that's the case, that would be a little bit disappointing, because I would, no, it's not the case. So that resolution is too high. So let's go to 0.02 and try to remesh at that point. See what we get. It does make me a little bit nervous that it's because in this non-responding mode. ZBrush does that quite a bit too for some of its stuff, but I do think it feels like ZBrush does remesh a bit easier. I think the whole process inside of ZBrush is probably a bit easier, but still working nevertheless. Yeah, so I'm not going to get too crazy with this. I'm going to go ahead and do the grab brush, make the brush size larger, and you can start to really tweak a little bit more of these forms. I shouldn't really worry too much about this. I just want to make somewhat of a decent sculpt to show this stuff off, but I got some very funky proportions going on right now. You definitely have to work our way around the model. So like as you do a little bit of sculpting, just rotate the model like that. Okay. Obviously the size of your brush matters for this, for how you're tweaking the shape of everything. Okay, I think that'll be good enough for this. I'm going to do this. I didn't realize I had on draw. I must have a texture on for that, so let's get rid of that. I just wanted to do this, and my stroke type looks like it is set to line, so I'm going to do dots for that. Okay, yeah. So that's what I was hoping with this draw tool. I'll just right click on there and control the strength. I just want to dig a hole out of there, and then I'm going to show you how we can add a sphere to the model for eye shapes. So I'm just going to smooth this out, And let's do the quick menu, and I don't have the remesh on there, so I'm going to add it back on there just because I wasn't quite sure if it was taking into consideration something about that resolution that we set for that. Okay, so that's how we can do basically the equivalent of the Dynamesh inside of Blender. Okay, we're going to make some eyeball shapes for this and put this in. This would be the equivalent of adding a subtool inside of ZBrush. But in here, we're going to be in object mode. So you can come up here. You probably have that on your quick favorites somewhere. But we're in object mode, and I'm going to do my hotkey that I've got set up for this with the Shift A. Yours might be different if you're in a different mode. I'm in the Blender mode. So you might have that, also in your quick favorites potentially for adding that. So if you go here, I'm just going to do the mesh. I am going to I'm going to use the UV sphere. Actually, I'll do this isosphere. We'll do that, and then the radius of it I'll put at 0.25. Let's go lower than that. We'll go even like 0.1. And then what we've got for resolution on this thing, let's get in the way, this menu. Let's see here, subdivisions, I'll do 6, something like that. And it's already on the transpose tool for translating. And let's just go ahead and move this here. I'm gonna get this moved back right into this area. I'll just scale this thing down. And I'm not going to be, if I was doing this for real, I would be a bit more picky about this and where the placement of this is. I'm just going to get this roughly into the correct position like this. Okay, and to get this on the other side, what I'm going to do is go to our modifier area. So we go here, go to modifier, and let's do that mirror modifier again. And if I click this mirror object, I did have that cube that was set in there from earlier, so let me hit undo. If I were to show you this, let's hide this one. So I put a cube at the center and just made it small like that, and it's hidden. So anytime I need to do a mirror, I can actually just select that cube, and then I can just mirror across like that. So that'll give us everything we need for our eyeballs. Now if we want to go sculpt the head, we select it, and then we can go into the sculpting mode up here. You might again have it on your quick favorites to go into that. And then now if we start to use the draw sharp, that's going to allow us to just sculpt right on the mesh and form a shape around this eye. And we don't have to worry about messing the eyeball up. And so that'll be good for us. Okay, and I'm going to make my brush size a bit smaller, tap F, and then just sculpt in here like this a bit. Pull this in here like that. I'm just holding down control, and then I'll add a little ridge like that, and that'll give us a shape for the eye, just like that. I'll hold down control again, just do that. I should probably remesh every so often, so I'll just go into my menu that I've got here for the quick favorites, and then remesh. And if we got to go to the grab brush, maybe we want to take that and refit that around. So that's how we can get a shape in there, get a little bit cleaner, a little bit more clean shape, and then we can start to fit this stuff around there. Use some of the tools to our advantage. I'll tap F and drag this up a bit more. This. And just pull this in. I'm just not super happy with the with the shape of this, so I could keep spending a lot of time on that, but I think that'll be good enough for now. So the other thing is, so that's eyeballs, and I'm going to go out of here and go back into object mode, and then I'm going to go and add, and then I'm going to use a cylinder. So I'm going to try and do this. I want to scale this down, move it over. So I'm going to make a shape for an ear. So let's put it on rotate like this. Put it more at this angle, and then I'll scale it along this direction and through here. So it's set to global right now. If I put this on local, then I could scale it like this, and it's going to take into consideration the rotation that we have for it. So let's select this right here, and the ear would actually be more at this kind of angle, and then maybe rotate out a little bit. And I don't need to be too perfect with this. I'm just going to move it around. Get this in here just like this, and I'll do the same thing that we did before with this. We'll go to the modifier, and we will do mirror for it, and let's select the cube, and that should mirror it across for us just like that. And then let's take a look at joining this together with the head. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and join the ears to the head here, and for this I'm going to turn on the wireframe. If you remember this, I put this on the quick favorites, and you should have that on there to where you can see this. That might help out. And instead of being in this sculpt mode, I really should go out into object mode. And I noticed that this was causing some issues if I was in sculpting mode whenever I was trying to apply the modifier. So it should be in object mode. So I can go ahead and select this head that I've got. I'll add a modifier. I'll do a Boolean. And I'm going to, instead of doing a difference between the shape or an intersect, I want a union, and I want to basically join this together. And then now I need to take this picker and say, what do you want to pick? I want to pick the cylinder object, and I want to join that together. And you can see it's going to do this. It's going to draw kind of funky like this. That's because the cylinder is still visible, the old one. So we can hide that. And here's what our object looks like. If everything works out good, go ahead and come up here and hit apply. And again, if I was in sculpting mode, this was causing some weird issues and not joining together correctly. Okay, now that it's joined together, we should be able to do the remeshing on it. But for that, we need to be in the sculpting mode. So we'll go out of object mode and go into sculpt mode. And then we can use our remesh option. I added to the quick favorites. Again, if you want to come up here and you want to check your number for that, you can click remesh. And we should be able to get a more evenly distributed topology. Now, I'm going to turn off the wireframe for this, and you can see it did remesh it. It's still going to have this faceting, and that's because our cylinder was pretty low res as we joined it to the head. So if you want that to be like a really nice looking cylinder, you're going to have more divisions to it. So I wouldn't really worry about if you can up the poly count or whatever on that shape or that surface. Don't worry about that at all, right? So just get that to be the right resolution. Now in my case, I know I'm just going to come up here and hold down shift, and I'm going to smooth out the results of this, so I'm not really too concerned about it. But if you want really clean shapes at the very beginning, then you need to have enough supporting geometry to do that at the very beginning. Okay, so that's going to have quite a bit of a big effect on the quality of what you're trying to make for that. Okay, and I'm just going to quickly lay this out like this and do something like this, and we've got the makings of the beginning of an ear like that. Obviously had to do whole lot more work to that, but that's how we can start to get the shape going, and then we could do the grab tool, make it a bit larger, and then start to tweak this stuff out a bit more. Brush size a little bit smaller. Get this kind of shape going. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show is how can we just join together one object to the head. What if we want to do multiple pieces? So let's take a look at that and see how we can do that. Okay, now we're going to make a neck shape for the head and a little bit of the torso. So let's get out of the sculpting mode, go into object mode. Again, you can come up here if you want to. I'm going to use my hotkey for this, the Shift A to do the add. Yours might be different. You might be using the quick shortcuts that you got. So I'm going to do mesh, and I'm going to do a cylinder. This thing's going to be huge. I'm going to put this at 60 for the divisions. Actually, I'll do like 120, make it pretty dense. And then radius 0.5. Let's see, depth. Let's put this at 1. So that's going to be this here. So let's do 0.25, something like that. And that's going to at least get me in the vicinity for this, and then I can scale this thing down. I do know from working with some heads, if we take this cylinder and we kind of rotate it back at this angle, that's going to work a little bit better for us. Maybe scale this thing down just a little bit more. And if I do Shift D, that'll make a duplicate of it. And again, if we want to control this, if I tap X, I can move this off to the side over here. Or you could just right click and it'll just put it right over the top of the old one. So depending on what you want to do with this, I'm just going to put this over here and move it. I'm going to scale this, so I'm going to make these into some smaller muscles, but if you hold down Control, let's see, I was trying to see if I do Control Shift. Yeah, you can scale in 2 different axes like this. So I'm trying to get it longer and thinner like this. Right here like that, and then I'm going to rotate this like this, rotate this here, just move it into position, something like that, and see here, we're going to do the mirroring thing, so I'll add a modifier to it, and I'll go ahead and mirror. And let's do the mirror object, and I should have that cube in there, so we could do that just like that. Now if I select this and I start to rotate this, it should still work with that that mirror modifier that we had on there, so we can still do some adjustments to this. We could scale it, we could move it. Again, if you want it to join together, you would have to do this bisect right in there, and you could do you could tell it to clip it and then move it, but that's up to you. It's up to you if you're going to actually make those run into each other. I think I'm going to just keep them somewhere like this right in here, and then push that out just a little bit like that. And I think I need it to be a little bit longer through here. Okay, just like that. And yeah, I think the next thing I'll add, I'll do a Shift A, I'll do a mesh, and I will do a UV sphere. I'll make the divisions on this. Let's see. What if I do 120 that way and that way, like that? That should be fairly dense, like that. I can control the radius and pull that down a bit. And then I'm just going to move this down, scale it like this, do a rotation on it. like that. Move this in, and I'll move this down somewhere inside of here. So this isn't going to be a spectacular looking shape, but I just want to show you how we can add some different shapes to this. Okay, and I'm going to move that forward just a little bit. So the way that we can Boolean multiple objects together at the same time, we would need what is considered a collection for this. So I'm going to go ahead and have to make a collection. So if we hover our cursor over this, we can make a new collection, and I can just type bool collect like this or something like that. So we can take the objects, just click and drag them into that collection. So I've got this shape, I want this shape here, and then I want this shape here. And so that's all in this collection. Now if we go back to the head and select the head, and we do a modifier, we can go back to that same workflow that we had, and we can go to Boolean. And what I'm going to do is put it on union, and instead of operator type is object, we're going to put this on collection. And once we do that, it's going to switch over. Take a second. And I'm not sure if I think we're going to have to designate which collection we're actually doing here. So I'm hoping it's not going to do the default one, but I'm going to let that go. I'm going to pause it and let it do its thing. Okay, that did take a little bit for that to finish up, but then I can go and I should be able to select the collection, the Boolean cut, and then it's going to evaluate the correct collection. So I'm going to pause it and let it just run through, and not sure exactly how long that's going to take. Okay, it finally finished up, and it did take quite a bit of time to finish up. Now I can take the everything that I had in that collection that I made and then hide that, and then so we basically have the head left at that point. If I want to do any edits to it, I could before I start to try to remesh this, but what I'm going to do is go into the sculpt mode, and then from there I'm going to remesh this just like we've done before. So hopping into sculpt mode, taking a little bit of time. This is I'm pretty new to using Blender, just putting this together, but I'm not sure if this these times are kind of normal for how long it takes to do some of these operations. And I'm coming from ZBrush, I am a little bit surprised at how long it takes to do certain operations that I'm used to ZBrush going pretty quick for this stuff. So I'm going to pause it again and wait for it to come through here and then remesh. And I do understand why it's taking a while. I needed to, this is a new mistake of mine because I'm a bit new to this. Before I went to the sculpting mode, what I should have done is just applied this Boolean modifier. So I believe it's trying to attempt to process that all over again, which is kind of disappointing because that took about I'd say 4 minutes to run through this. So I'm gonna have to let it go through, and if I mess that up, I'm going to have to come right here and go back into object mode and apply that. I don't want to make you sit through that mess. Okay, hopefully you can learn from me, but that took an extremely long time to be able to put this thing through. Need to be in object mode, need to be able to actually apply this Boolean. And then once the Boolean is actually applied, and go into the sculpt mode, and should be able to go to the remesh and remesh this. and then be able to start to sculpt on top of this and smooth out some of the surfaces and things like that, right? So I'm going to put this on here, and then I've got symmetry turned on, and so I'll just start to smooth out some of the results on that. That. And then now we could use stuff like the grab brush and really start to tweak out proportions and things like that. Kind of come here, zoom out a little bit, and you can see that resolution. It didn't even feel like the resolution was like super high. So this stuff does move a little bit faster if I have the operation order correct, but it's a pretty heavy penalty to pay if you get the order incorrect for some of this Boolean stuff on there. So I was definitely a bit surprised on how long it took for that. I'm going to do flatten and then make the brush really large. And maybe flatten this down. Right click on here and take the strength and pull that up to like 100% on that. Really smooth this thing out. And then remesh again. Then that would give me a base to sculpt on. So I know that part, it took a long time for me to get through it, but again, if there's anything that you can learn from what I kind of messed up on there is the order of operations that need to happen for that to go through correctly. So again, you want to set up your collection that you've got, and you want to run that Boolean through, but then apply it before you go into the sculpt mode. And then once you go into the sculpt mode, then you can remesh, and it should go a whole lot faster than what I had to just go through. Okay, so I don't know, I'm just kind of messing around here and adding some more forms in through here. But I think you get the idea. So I think that should be enough to get you started, get you moving. I think I have a pretty ugly sculpt here, but I'm just in the beginning stages of learning this myself, and I thought this might be useful to show you some of the stuff that I've found so far and some of the things that I've learned, and it's helped get me to this point finally. And so wanted to throw this information together for you, and hopefully it helps speed up your process for moving on over to Blender and doing some sculpting.